Hey, boys and girls, my name's Mrs. Lanning, and I'm so excited to welcome you back to Writer's Workshop. So, boys and girls, I have a funny story. Mr. Lanning, guess what? He loves superheroes, okay? He loves superhero movies, he thinks they're the best. And so one day, we went and we saw Iron Man 2. And honestly, I didn't really understand what was going on. And he just kept going on and on about how much he loves the characters. And I was just thinking, well, sure, it was a good movie, but I don't really see what was so great about it. Well, that's when we realized I think the reason I didn't totally understand what was going on and I didn't really love the characters is because guess what? I had never seen the first Iron Man. Now I have. But at the time, I hadn't. And so that's when we realized, oh my goodness, Mrs. Lanning, in order for me to enjoy these movies, I need to go see the first one so that way I understand who Iron Man really is and I can really like it. And I tell you what, now that I've seen the beginning and I've been introduced to the characters and I'm watching it in order, I really like the superheroes. So, writers, that got me thinking about our series writing. I started to think about what order I need to put my books in and if I need to do any extra work in my first book in the series because I want to make sure that my readers really know who my character is and they really like them. So let's look at my stories. I'm going to read you a couple pages out of each story and I want you to give me a thumbs up if you think, ooh, this would make a great first book in the series or that's more of a story for the middle. So, let me read you a page out of this book. Gretchen heard a noise. Peep, peep, caw, peep, peep, caw. What is that? She thought. She crouched down on the path. It was a fierce bird. Gretchen felt afraid. I'll be brave, she thought. She scooped up the bird into her sweater. So, that page out of that book, do you think that's a good first book or save it for later? Save it for a later book in the middle of the series. I think you're right. I think that sounds like maybe a book for later because I didn't really introduce Gretchen or explain that she was in a tree house. I was acting like I already thought that you know who Gretchen is and where she is, right? So that's a book for later. So let me read another page from another book and you give me a thumbs up if you think this would make a great first book. Gretchen had just moved to the country. One day, she was in the forest by her new house. I wish I could have a tree fort, Gretchen thought. Sometimes Gretchen was lonely. She wanted a place to play. She looked around the woods. She wondered, what could I build a fort with? What do you think, guys? Would that make a great first book or save it for later? Aha! I think this would make a great book one because it sounds like we're meeting Gretchen for the first time and we're really giving the backstory and explanation of who she is, how she lives, moved out to the country, and then she really wants a tree fort, right? So we're explaining that. So writers, you just heard the difference between a story that starts right in the middle of a character's life and adventure and a story that happens right at the beginning explaining who and where the character is. Both of these are great ways to start a story, but I have to think if I'm going to give my readers a whole bunch of books about Gretchen, I want to think which one do I want to put on top? Which one is the book that they should read first because it introduces Gretchen and it explains where Gretchen lives and all about the treehouse because I want my readers to be able to understand all the other books that follow. And what's nice about writing a series is I don't have to introduce Gretchen every single time I write a new book. As long as I make sure I pick one book to be book number 1 and I make sure that that's where I introduce Gretchen and I tell my readers, this is the book you need to read first and then you can read the other books. So boys and girls, today I want to teach you that series writers often tell a lot of important details about their characters in book number 1 of their series. This helps the reader understand the characters better and know what to look for in other books in the series. So I began to wonder about the first book in the series yesterday when one of my students asked me, so Mrs. Lanning, the book Henry and Mudge, when did Henry get his big dog Mudge? So I decided last night to reread the very first book in the Henry and Mudge series. And guess what I realized? That answered the question. In that very first book, it gave the explanation of how Henry got Mudge. And that's where I found it. And I started thinking about other series that we've been reading in the same way. We talked about the Star Wars. We talked about Junie B. Jones. And I realized all of those books introduced the character. Book 1 of a series talked about who the character is, where the character lives, what the character likes, how the character feels, who the character's best friends are, and important background details. They tell us who the character is, where the character lives, and what the character likes. Like I said, we've been thinking about Junie B. Jones, Star Wars, Captain Underpants, right? All of these series writers, they don't just say, here's your books, have fun, read them. No, they actually number them and they tell you which book they want you to read first because that first book is so important to introduce you to the character. Just like Mrs. Lanning, I should have never gone to Iron Man 2 without seeing Iron Man 1 because I needed to be introduced to who in the world Iron Man even is, right? Same thing when you are writing your books. You need to make sure that you talk about who the character is, where the character lives, and what the character likes in your very first book. You might also write about how the character feels, who their best friends are, how the character becomes friends with other characters, and how that character comes to live in a certain place. So writers, we just noticed these things that mentor authors are already doing, and we know that you can do the same work for your character too. You can introduce your character in that first book by giving those details like where the character lives, who they are, what they like, special friends that they might have. So writers, before you begin writing today, I want you to practice introducing your particular characters that you're writing a series about. Imagine that you're introducing them. Maybe you're sharing it with your writing partner. You're introducing them to your writing partner like they've never met your character before. Or maybe to a stuffed animal. Or maybe to a sibling or someone at home. Introduce your character. Talk about who they are, what they like, where they live, any special friends, any special pets that they might have. Share those important details so you can be prepared to write that in the first book of your writing. So writers, before you dive into writing, you know how important it is to make a plan about your work. So I want you to think about your plan for today. Some of you are working on a story from yesterday, and maybe you're thinking, ooh, I want to actually make this my first book in my series. So what you could do, friends, is you could take paper and you could staple 2 papers on top to write the introduction of your character. Or maybe some of you are ready to start a new book and you're going to write that first book and you want to make sure that you introduce the character. Talk about who the character is, how they got to living where they live, any best friends that they have, any special things that we need to know about them as the character. Introduce them and include those details. All right, writers, I can't wait to see what you do. Until next time, writers go write.